Holy Spirit, you are our comforter and who is holy. We are not holy. We are fallen flesh, and our minds tend to drift from you. But at this time, we're focused on praising you and thinking about all of your wondrous ways. And we're blessed to think that there is a Messiah who came for us. Yeshua said that he would depart so that he could be with all people at all times, at all moments. Be with us now. Speak to us now from your scriptures. And we'll thank you in advance that you will do this as you promised. In Yeshua's name, amen. Each week, it comes to deciding what to speak about. And every congregational leader has this, and different people come to it in different ways. I try not to prepare too early because I'll just change it so often. If I start on a Monday, it's going to change 3 times by Thursday. Because what it does, it breeds confusion. But I know if I'll wait until Thursday and I begin to feel the pressure, I mean, there's just no dancing around with it. You got to come to a conclusion. So I try to think about, well, what would I be interested in learning about? Because I have to research these things. I have to read the commentaries. I have to get synthesized thought from scholars and so on and so forth. And then I have to pray about it. You know, Lord, what is there about this? You know, I want to plumb the depths of these issues. And what would be interesting? And what haven't I heard about before over a period of decades? What haven't I heard as a congregant over many years? Well, one came to me that I'd like us to look at because I just don't remember ever hearing a sermon about it. And we find it in Numbers chapter 21, and I'm going to begin with verse 5. This is the story of in the wilderness, okay, the Jewish people, all right, they have sinned, and we're going to read about that. So I got to reading the commentaries, and lo and behold, there isn't much said about the brazen serpent in the wilderness. I'm looking it up, and I'm reading what everybody's got to say, and there's almost nothing at all, which kind of surprises me. It was a major deal. And maybe what it is that maybe there's just not a whole lot of conclusion that's been come to, or not much made of it. But let's focus on it this morning. So please turn to Numbers 21 and verse 5 as we explore this experience of what these people went through. And the people spoke against God and against Moses. Wherefore have you brought us out here from Egypt to die in the wilderness? For there's no bread, neither is there any water, and our soul loathes this light bread, meaning manna. Yeah. Morning manna, afternoon manna, fried manna for dinner. Okay? And we have to look forward to breakfast tomorrow morning. We can have baked manna. 40 years, only manna. So you're in the desert. There's nothing. Where's the vegetation? Where's the animal life? Where's anything? All we got is manna. You'd think that there would be a certain amount of gratitude that there's something. But it's tiring. It's boring. And suppose you're in the 39th and 40th year, and for 26 years, from the time of your birth, that's all you got was manna. You've never tasted bread. You've never tasted meat. You've never tasted vegetables, and so on and so forth. You're healthy, but that's all you got. And the people became disgruntled about it, and so on. So they began to speak against the Lord about this kind of whining. Verse 6 it says, "And the Lord sent fiery serpents among the people, and they bit the people, and much people of Israel died. Therefore the people came to Moses and says, We have sinned, for we have spoken against the Lord and against thee. Pray unto the Lord that he takes these serpents from us. And Moses prayed for the people. And the Lord said to Moses, Make thee a fiery serpent, and set it upon a pole, and it shall come to pass that every one that is bitten, when he looks upon it, shall live. And so Moses made a serpent of brass, and put it upon a pole, and it came to pass that if a serpent had bitten any man, when he beheld the serpent of brass, he lived." So there they are in the desert, not much to eat except manna, but there's snakes. Well, the snakes must have found something, but we're not talking about just a few snakes, because we're talking about, let's say 600,000 men came out of Egypt. Well, they had families. I mean, we're talking about, we're in the millions of people, right? And if there's a problem with the snakes are affecting more than a dozen. It wouldn't even be noticed if 12 people got snake bite. But we're talking about a massive thing going on here among a huge number of people that are getting bitten by the snakes. I mean, it's completely out of proportion to something normal. I mean, they're getting stung, and where you walk, there's more snakes, and there's more, and there's kind of an outbreak of snakes and snake bite. It's a problem. It's a problem that among the millions of people, they bring this to Moses' attention. So this is a big problem. Big problem. Everybody's getting bitten by snakes. And so what to do about it? Moses seeks the Lord. And the Lord gives him a very interesting instruction. Not sure that Moses understood the meaning of the instruction. We may have to struggle to gain the meaning of this instruction. Where the Lord says, now here's what I want you to do. I want you to make a fiery serpent made of brass. And I want you to wind it around a pole. And it shall come to pass that everyone that's bitten, when he looks upon the brass serpent on the pole, he's going to be cured. So here it is. You got bit on this foot by a snake, and three toes were chewed upon by another snake. And there you are. Snake bite happens pretty fast. That venom goes through you. How long have you got to live? And if there was enough of a problem, there's people dying right and left of snake bite. And snake bite is painful. It's not like a mosquito bite. It's painful. They come out and take a chunk out of you. And then the venom comes in, and that's a painful way to die. All right, but it's happening all over the place. Okay, a massive outbreak of snake bite. And there's no antidote, except Moses has got an antidote from the Lord. So he did what he was instructed to do, okay, and it was the only remedy available, and so the people did what they were told that they were supposed to do. Moses creates a standard. The word standard has gotten kind of a distorted, as the language has evolved. Originally, to raise a standard was to raise a pole, to raise a flag. That's our standard. Okay, it's the central thing that we focus on, and so it has a very similar meaning in modern day parlance. But that's what the standard was Moses created a standard, and with a brass snake. Now the people, they're desperate. They just, all right, I look upon the snake. Sure thing, I can look upon the snake. No big deal, I can look upon the snake. And if that's my insurance policy, I'm up for it. And sure enough, it works. Sure enough, it works. And the people are amazed. You mean there's hundreds of us, thousands of us with snake bite? We're dropping like flies, hundreds and thousands of us, perhaps daily. Certainly weekly, it's huge. And now, that's all we got to do. Let's carry this standard wherever we go, because we're going to need it, because we need to be insured against this outbreak of snake bite ever again. Okay? So, all right, Moses did what he was supposed to do. The people did what they were supposed to do. Did they understand why they were doing it? Why was there supposed to be a snake on a brass on a pole? Huh? What do you mean? Moses, he doesn't have to understand it. He just does it. And the people, I don't think they understood it either. They clearly didn't even have the scriptures to go by. All right? So, but hey, it works. That's it. And yet, why? Why did it work? Why did the Lord make that instruction? Well, this is a perplexity that I really wanted to find out. So I consulted with the experts in the books. And you know something? They didn't tell me. They didn't tell me. I mean, they said it was there and the people obeyed because God said to do it and so on. And that's all the books told me, was that God said it, they did it, it worked. And I'm still left with the mystery. So I'm pondering this during the recent days. And I'm thinking, well, all right, you know, in a way I can impute an understanding to that. And maybe I'll ask you to join with me as to what some possible explanations are. All right? Not doctrine, but see if it works with you. Well, the first thing is that there is a pattern in the Bible whereby there's the material, and then there's the spiritual. All right, we can see that pattern. Okay. First there's the counterfeit, and then there's the real. First the material, then the spiritual. First the counterfeit, then the genuine event. All right. And we can say, well, this is like photography, or what we used to do in photography, was we would create a negative of the positive. You folks here are mostly all old enough to remember negatives in photography. There wasn't always cell phones and pocket devices like that. So in photography, you would get a negative of the positive. You could see the outlines, all right, but it was the opposite. Where it was dark, it was light. Where it was light, it was dark, and so on and so forth. And so there is a biblical pattern that can be asserted, that there is the negative and then the positive. We can see this so clearly. I mean, we're looking, you know, we're anticipating that there will be what they call an antichrist or an anti-Messiah, and he will come first before the real Messiah. Okay? Similar outlines, going to sit on the throne in Jerusalem, and so on and so forth. Going to have lying wonders, and then there's going to be the real Messiah. And there are many, many examples of this in the scriptures. First there's the outline of things, and then we can see that there's a lesson in it, by way of analogy and by way of parable. Okay, when the Jewish people came out of bondage, well, all right, that's like the bondage of sin. And when we went out into the desert, well, that's roaming around, waiting, you know, trying to follow after God as best we can. And then there's the Red Sea. Well, would that be like baptism? And then we come into the Promised Land. Is that like heaven? You see, so there's a lot of different examples like that in the Bible of the negative outline that is a teaching lesson because eventually there's going to be the positive aspect of it. And when we see the positive aspect of it, we can look back and say, aha! Isn't this similar to what the negative was? I see it's the same shape. It's similar size. It does a similar thing. That's an evidence that God pre-planned it. God knew what he was doing. God knew that there was a reason for having this instruction of putting the snake on a standard so everybody could see it. I mean, thousands, hundreds of thousands, even millions of people could see it. Must have been way up there. Okay? And they're all bowing down. If you bow down to the snake, you're cured. They didn't understand it because they didn't have the perspective of living in the year 2016. But now we do have perspective. Okay? You see, the Bible is a progressive revelation. As we move along in time, over a very long period of time, we get to understand more. Okay? Not only as a society, but as individuals. So what could this possibly be is the analogy. What could it possibly be? Oh my goodness. But you know what? The people did it just out of, because God said so. You know, God said do it, let's do it, and so on and so forth. So what happens so often is when there's anything that has to do with God, you know, people make a big deal of it, right? And this continued in Israeli society, and we read about it again in Isaiah 45:22, all right, where they kept this standard, and they kept this brazen snake of brass, and they kept it. So we're talking about the time of Isaiah, approximately 712 BCE, before the Common Era, 712 BC, approximately. And the time of Moses was like 700 or 800 years previous to that. So they have kept this relic for 700 years plus, and it's still part of it. Why? Because what a miracle it was that all these people were cured just by looking at the snake. What an amazing thing. Let's look some more at the snake. Maybe it has other properties. And the thing actually became like an idol. Okay. So the king says, I think it was Hezekiah, says, we're going to do away with this. This is not good. This is not good for us to be in idolatry. All right? So it's done away with on that basis. But there's a curious thing. There's a curious thing in Isaiah 45:22 that says, look unto me and be ye saved. Look unto me and be ye saved. Now that's Isaiah. Okay? So Isaiah is saying something that is meaningful to us. Getting saved. In our parlance as believers, getting saved means, you know, getting the Spirit of God in our hearts and so on, the seed of faith. So Isaiah, this is not New Testament. You know, there are not new concepts in the New Testament. All of the concepts of the New Testament simply explain the concepts originally introduced in the Old Testament. It's an amplification, an explanation. Things that didn't make sense before, now they are illuminated in the light of the Holy Spirit. So here we have Isaiah speaking on behalf of the Lord, and the Lord says, look unto me and be ye saved. Could this be a clue as to what it means, that can give us some reflection on looking at the serpent? Let me see. If I look out to the Lord and I can be saved, so looking upon the serpent cures me of snake bite. All right? Let's go out and speculate. It would seem as though, I mean, it seems obvious enough, that the snakes represent sin. It's painful. You can't see it coming. It takes a bite out of you, and you die. I mean, when we're sinning, okay, it's a form of taking in a little death. Let me see. I'll just take this little sin over here and drink in just a little more death. I like that. It felt so good to die a little more. Yeah. And so it's taking in something that's killing our spirit man. Killing it, making it less alive to God. So the more we sin, the less alive we are to God. And that's like drinking in a little more spiritual death. So which are we going to do? Are we going to drink in spiritual life, or are we going to drink in spiritual death? Okay, it depends upon whether we're sinning or we're doing the opposite of sinning, which is looking unto the Lord. Two opposite things. So let's see what happens here. We have the snakes, which to me represents sin. It bites, it's not good for me, and it is a form of spiritual death. Little doses of spiritual death that we get by sinning. Snake bite. Okay? All right, I can see that. It rings true to me. I mean, Moses didn't tell me that, but that just rings true to me that the snakes represent, by way of analogy, they represent sin. Okay. I can go with that. And now, but what's the point of the snake? On a pole, raised way up, very, very high, so that millions of people can see it. It must have been very high, a very big pole. And what's the connection between that? You know, it sounds very similar to Yeshua on a cross, the Messiah on a cross. And people are looking to Yeshua, and so on. So here we have, so it reminds me, the two things, the snake on the pole, Yeshua on the cross. Somehow it seems to me that there's kind of a connection according to this negative photograph, the negative of the photograph. They just seem too similar to me to ignore the comparison. So I say, all right, can it be that these things are somehow related by way of analogy? To me, that's real. Okay, that there's something to that. It's just too similar, and one has to do with sin, but looking upon Yeshua is the opposite of sinning. So I say, well, you know, Paul, you're getting somewhere in this speculation. I'm feeling more comfortable with it. Let's take the analogy a little further and see if it still meets with my sense of soundness. Does it ring true to me? What it would be the comparison between the snake and Yeshua? Why are they opposites and yet similar? They're both hung in full sight of everybody. But what's a snake? You know, what's with that? I don't like to think of the snake and Yeshua it's saying even in the same sentence. And what is the similarity and yet the oppositeness of them? Well, the snake, to me, as in the Garden of Eden, represents the adversary of Yeshua. That's an image of the devil, of Satan. So let me see. Moses, you're telling me that if I bow down to the devil, the snakes will quit biting me. Why would that be? Well, maybe if I bow down low enough, and I bow down often enough, and I get completely submerged under the heel of the devil. When his foot is clearly on my neck and I have no choice and I am in complete submission to the devil, his subordinates don't got to bite me. They already won. They already won. All right? So let me see. The snake on the pole, he's the master snake, and all the rest of them are little derivative snakes. So it's my submission to the big snake that causes the little snakes to lay off. Okay? Because that mosquito bite, I have scratched it, and I just give myself over to the sin. I just completely surrender to the sin. And if I completely surrender to the big snakes, there's no need, there's no resistance. I'm just completely submitted. I have given myself completely to it. It owns me. I'm completely devoted to it, and I bow down to it, and whatever you say I'll do, because otherwise those other guys snakes, and you're the only one that can stop them. Oh, this begins to sound, this has a certain ring to it for me, I hope possibly for you. And now, isn't that like life? But why is this example in the wilderness? For our future reference. Okay. You see, up until the time of Yeshua, we, mankind, didn't seem to have much choice. There didn't seem to be much choice. Only thing was, our only recourse, we were fallen, and out of our fallenness, we sinned, and there didn't seem to be any recourse. All we could do is just give way to the sin. We didn't feel like it seemed so hard to resist. And so the only thing we could do to keep from being bitten by the snakes was to avoid the snakes and not sin. So here we are, until the time of Yeshua, we're just busy trying to avoid the sin. So Moses gives us 613 examples of the way to avoid getting snake bite. 613 laws, 10 big ones. You know, no stealing, no lying, no murder. You know what they are, okay? Those are 10 big examples, but there's 613 laws. And don't you sin, because you're without remedy. That's what was going on. For thousands of years, mankind didn't really have remedy. Just avoid the sin. And here's the sins. Pay attention. Try to avoid those snakes. Everywhere you look, there's another sin out there. There's another lie. There's another adultery. There's another addiction. There's another thing. But if you'll avoid them, don't eat blood. Oh, I got check. I remember that. Oh, yeah, check. I know not to do that. Yeah, check. I'm not doing that either. I'm avoiding all those things because there's no choice for me except to avoid the sin. That's the situation that mankind was in for thousands of years. But God did have a remedy. And he's making sure that we know what the remedy is. Takes a sweet old time with hundreds of years of prophecy about who the Messiah is going to be. Because this is going to be the magic thing. The one thing in one lifetime out of one spermatozoa. Okay? A spiritual seed. But it's actually not going to, it's got to be a supernatural birth because it has to be a spiritual seed. It has to be God's seed. It can't be a man's seed because the spiritual inheritance comes through the male. It has to be a seed from God that's sinless. So there is a supernatural meiosis and mitosis so that the zygote that's breeding in there in Miriam is actually without sin. Has to be a sinless individual. Because God has a remedy, and it's a mystery. And that mystery is going to be that there is going to be a perfect human being. One of our class, one of the human phylum, is going to overcome this sin problem. Why? Because he was not born with the propensity to sin because he was not of the fallen nature. His spiritual spermatozoa, his seed, was from God himself. And so he was able to survive the worst that the enemy could do. And so he faced the worst hatred, the worst negativity, and survived it, overcame it, and showed himself to be the stronger. So in the spiritual contest between who was stronger, was it going to be God or was it going to be the adversary? Okay, God showed himself to be the stronger, but he always was the stronger. No problem for him. He's not affected. He's not worried. Nothing bad happens to God. But what about his creation? We human beings. There's something terrible going on. We're getting bit by snakes and sin right and left, and God is feeling bad about it, that his noble creation is suffering. Snake bite for thousands of years, and something must be done. But God has to inform us of what the solution is. There's going to be a supernatural human being. He's going to be special. He's going to be a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. Somebody that we didn't even esteem. A reproach among the people. He had no form or comeliness that we should look to him with admiration. Oh, yeah. Oh, and he's going to have to be born in Bethlehem. He's got to be descendant of David. Got to be sold for 30 pieces of silver. Got to come into Jerusalem on the foal of an ass. Oh, yeah, all of that. Oh, and he has to have his hands and feet pierced. All out of the Old Testament. God is predicting this hundreds of times so that we will know what the solution is. And lo and behold, the solution appears upon the scene. The solution that everybody's been waiting for and that God has patiently been preparing for thousands of years. And finally, he's alive. He's on planet Earth. And now what happens is the devil sees this must be overcome. If he shows himself to be stronger than me, then what? Where will I be? A human being will have bested me. One of the human class will have bested me of the angel class. He will be above me. A human being will be above me. I don't like that, the devil says. But Yeshua knows his assignment. The heart of God says, I will go and I will suffer. I will do it because I love my creation, and I cannot stand to see them suffering snake bite all the time. I have to do something, and the heart of God says, whatever it takes, I will suffer it. You can throw at me your worst. I will pay the penalty, do all of them. Whatever it takes. Take me to the brink of extinction and then extinguish me. But I will take it because I yearn that should be cured, that they should be cured. And now we come to the other side of the photograph, the other side of the negative of the photograph. And now we don't have a snake on the pole anymore. Okay, we have Yeshua on the tree, on the cross. The opposite and yet the parallel thing. And what does that have to do with it? You see, God knew there was going to be somebody hanging on a cross whose hands and feet were going to be pierced. He predicted it. So that we would know that it's the truth and not just a normal situation, that God is part of God's plan. And that we would be able to look back and say, there's a clue in here. There's a clue. If I bow down to the snake and surrender myself to it, I can stop the pain and stop the sin and so on and so forth because I'm submitted and so on. But all I got to do is look upon that snake. Kind of similar, it seems to me, as to looking upon Yeshua upon the cross. In what way, Paul? Well, I come to the word vicarious. I've heard that word before. I thought, what does it mean? Have they used the word vicarious with regard to the snake? I didn't see it, but I have heard the word vicarious, and I thought, what does vicarious mean? Well, all right. I'm a moviegoer. Love the movies. Always love the movies, right? Nothing else to do, let's go see a flick. So, and on television, why do I do it? Well, because I identify with the good guys. I identify with the character. And I get into it whereby I'm transported from my present reality into the reality of the character in the film or in the story. So I'm living as that character through them. I am, for the moment, I'm transported, and temporarily I believe I'm like that guy, the hero of the day, right? Whatever it is. And when he hurts, we hurt, but we're living vicariously through this character. And I love being transported out of my present reality, right? Life is painful. I like to escape, okay? I escape in the films, among other things, okay? Good bowl of popcorn, ice cream, it's good. So, well, now let me see. Can I apply the word vicariously to Yeshua? Because if I'm looking for the antidote, the opposite of the sin, can it be that by my looking at Yeshua, that the opposite would happen? Okay? That as I'm into the story of Yeshua, I'm living vicariously with him. I am into him. I'm into that character, Yeshua. And he's on the cross. And when I'm looking at him, when I'm focused on him, when I'm reading about him, when I'm singing about him, I am looking upon him, not with my physical eyes. I can't see him with my physical eyes, but I am seeing him with my eyes of faith. We do have eyes of faith that don't have to do with the pupils and the irises of our eyes. Our eyes are of faith. We can see things through our faith. Those are eyes of faith that we have. Those of us who are born again, and God help you if you haven't been born again by this time, you better get in touch with somebody here. We got lots of people who will help you out. Okay? So with our eyes of faith, we are looking upon Yeshua. And when we're looking upon Yeshua, we are not thinking about sin. We are not thinking about the dirty dog things that were done to us. We're not thinking about the negativity. We're not thinking about our next physical gratification. We're not thinking about cheating anybody. We're not thinking about lying about anything. We're into that character, and we're into his righteousness, and we're living through him vicariously. That's us. That's what we're doing with our eyes of faith. And when we are in him, when we are in his Spirit that was shed abroad because he was able to be with us because he left us. And now, when we do that, I don't have to look at the snake in submission to get the little snakes to stop. I can look to Messiah Yeshua. I can get into him. I can get into that story. Okay? And those little snakes can't bite me while I am looking upon him. Because when I am in the Spirit, they can't touch me. So, seems to me like there really is a parallel. There really is something of the negative of the photograph. And it sounds to me like some of you are joining me in this speculation. It's not bad, but I've never heard it from anybody before. Okay? That when we look with our eyes of faith upon Yeshua, okay, those snakes, the small snakes and the big snake, can't get at me. I have risen above. I have risen above the angel class. I am with the Yeshua class. I am into him vicariously. Or I identify with him. And when I am doing that, I am in him. And when I am in him, I am above the big snake and the little snakes. They can't touch me. It seems to me like I can, hey, Paul, are you saying that if I'm into him all the time, I'm not going to sin? Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I know, let's be realistic. I can't, it's just not, in my frail human condition, I can't be in him all the day and all the night and every waking hour and so on and so forth. But I can do more. I can be in it more. I can avoid more sin. I can avoid more snake bite because surely the sin does bite me. Surely there's negative repercussions. The law of reaping, of sowing and reaping says so. But the more I can remember to do that, the more it will go well with me. The more it will go well with all of us. We look upon him and we say, ooh, ah, how wonderful thou art. And we begin to think of what he did and how he did it and the things he said and the way that he helped us in our life and in the previous yesterday and last month and the previous year, and how he gave me a revelation that I can understand the scriptures where I couldn't before. We remember the story of the blind man, blind from birth. And by way of analogy, he says, when questioned about it, he says, all I know is one thing. Before I was blind, and now I can see. For all of us, before we were blind, and now with our eyes of faith, we can see. Hallelujah. To me, now, I feel like, for my understanding, I'm content that I now understand something about the brazen serpent on the standard in the midst of the wilderness of this life that we're in. Let's close in order of prayer.